Last week, I interviewed the founder of Apogee and 3D Realms, Scott Miller. Scott and his team created the hit video game Duke Nukem, but they couldn't have done it without my guest today, Ken Silverman, who made the engine behind that game, the build engine. I'm very pleased to welcome Ken. Thank you and welcome.
Hello.
So, as you know, I was part of the Duke Nukem modding community in the late 90s and early 2000s, and we've been exchanging messages for around 25 years, and I'm really honored that this is your debut video interview. So I'll start with your bio. Ken Silverman is a game programmer best known for writing the Build Engine, a groundbreaking 2.5D engine which was used to create iconic 1990s first-person shooter games, including Duke Nukem 3D, Shadow Warrior, Blood, among others. At the age of just 17, he was once considered the primary rival of John Carmack, who made the Doom engine, and Tim Sweeney, who created Unreal, and he joins us today. So let's start at the beginning. Tell me about your upbringing prior to coding the Build engine.
Well, let's see. I grew up born in New York State. Don't remember too much from there. Moved at the age of 4.5 to Rhode Island in a nice town called East Greenwich. Went to East Greenwich High School, the public high school there. Um, so I started programming at the age of around 8 years old. My first computer was the Texas Instruments 99.4A. I was having difficulties getting anything to run like what I saw in the arcade on that thing because it was very slow. But still, I made a few games with joysticks. You could move a dot around the screen. Called it a monster. That's you. You're a little square. But yeah, eventually my dad would borrow a computer from Brown. One was called the K-Pro 2, which was a CP/M machine, which had a little basic editor, I think MBasic from Microsoft. So I made a couple of games on that thing. Then he borrowed an HP, which was not PC compatible. It was this weird workstation, which I guess somebody at his work wasn't using. So he borrowed it, let me play around with it for a few years. Wrote a bunch of cool games and graphics on that. But really, it all started when I got the first PC. This was end of 1988. And so I started on Quick Basic 4.0. I really loved it because you could, for the first time, edit in a nice text editor. You could go up and down and left and right with the arrow keys, and you could run right away. And it had pretty good graphics too, VGA at the time. We had VGA graphics pretty early on. Didn't have a sound card for the first couple of years. We did get some weird non-standard one called the Kovacs Voice Master Key. And so I'd play around with that, and they had some cool demos where you could play some music on it. And I was very curious how that worked, so I made my own version. But I mean, I think that's what really started me in assembly language, because when you had to write every single sample one by one, you really needed a lot of speed to do that. And in Quick Basic, it was pretty tough to do something that was high quality.
You were all self-taught?
Not quite. No, in the beginning, my mom and dad actually would teach me, maybe my brother too. And so they enjoyed teaching me basic at the time. I had a tough time learning that dim statement. I just didn't understand it right away. Don't know why. Seems so easy now. But yeah, I mean, I just loved it. And I would often watch my brother programming in the beginning, although it wasn't too long before I was more of the programmer than he was. And he would, so he ended up forming a company in college, and I kept programming. I never wanted to join his company for some reason, but I found the programming more exciting because I could make cool demos and show them to people.
What really sparked your interest at an early age? It sounds like your parents and family had a lot of support and a lot of influence behind that.
Um, in the very beginning, I think it was actually my brother who knew that he wanted a computer because he saw his friends had them, and I don't know what kinds they were, maybe Apple IIs, Commodore 64, something like that. And obviously, we had been exposed to computers at our school. They had Apple IIs at the time. So he enjoyed that. And he knew that to have a computer at home would be fun thing to play with. I don't know, maybe when we were that age, 8, 10, whatever it was, we probably thought we were just going to play games. And my dad was really against that.
Hmm.
So he wanted to make sure that we did more useful things on it, not just playing games on it.
So what kind of kid were you at that age, and I guess
Oh,
into your teen years?
definitely quiet when I was at school, nerdy. I loved math. Always got great grades in math. I was actually pulled a year ahead, I think, in the first grade. And so I that kind of started me on teaching sort of myself how to do math on my own. Although I would get help from my parents. My mom was a math major, so
Hmm.
she knew all that stuff. She also does programming. My dad does programming. But yeah, about the age of 15 is, I'd say, about when I was beyond their help. So I'd ask them questions like, how do you do perspective calculations for 3D graphics? And they wouldn't know. They would just point me to the computer graphics book by Andy Van Dam. They had one of those. I probably got it for free because he's at Brown as well. My dad being a professor at Brown University.
Now you had a number of projects as before build, I assume, a lot of trial and error and growth and learning. And what are some of those early projects?
Well, a lot of them are on my website. You obviously know about Ken's Labyrinth.
Yep. And I'll link the website in the description of the video.
One was I tried to make my own Super Mario Brothers clone called Super Silver Bros, shortened as Cybros. And it had smooth scrolling. It used the same scrolling tricks as Commander Keen type thing. Although it didn't pan infinitely, it was limited to one screen's worth or 256K of VGA memory. If I had known about the Commander Keen trick, I would have done that too.
Were those in C or in assembly?
Yeah. Um, Cybros, I would say, didn't use assembly language. Really, my first project that used assembly might have been Kentris, and I might have used it just for the sound part, but I have to check. Definitely, Ken's Labyrinth was full of assembly language.
So go ahead and talk a little bit more about Ken's Labyrinth. I know that was the first commercial game that you released. How did that happen? How did it come to be published by Epic?
Well, to say how it started, it was me just watching my brother play Wolfenstein 3D and thinking, well, that doesn't look so hard. So it took me a few days, I think, with a quick basic prototype to sort of get a 3D view working. Now, there were a lot of problems with my early prototypes. It wasn't quite the right perspective and obviously very slow. But, I kept working from there and learned a few things along the way. I already knew trigonometry, so I took that knowledge and did a little ray casting and eventually cleaned up the engine. And I had a friend who lived a mile away. His name was Andy Cotter. And so he was also excited by the 3D stuff and he was willing to help me out. He was a map designer mostly, but he also tried to help with artwork and sounds. Um, so yeah, until January 1st, that's when we made our first release. It was basically a two-person project, Andy and myself, and then got a lot of calls from people the next few weeks. One of them was Epic Mega Games, and we had heard of them, so that's who we went with. I mean, there were some other companies that did call us that were also reputable, but I think they wanted me to move there, and I wasn't ready for that. Epic was willing to have me work remotely and just complete the game without spending too much time on it.
And how old were you at the time?
I was 17, still finishing high school at the time, and so I didn't want to spend too much time finishing Ken's Labyrinth. Part of the reason is that Doom had just been announced, so they had a text release about all the features that Doom was going to have, along with some screenshots. There were no demos at the time, so I just had to base it off the screenshots. And obviously, thanks to Wolfenstein, I knew they were real. I didn't know how fast the engine was, so it wasn't until summer of '93 when I saw Doom for the first time, and this was some alpha version that the guys at Apogee had snuck to me. They wanted me to see it. So I actually started the build engine sort of before Ken's Labyrinth was really fully finished,
Hmm.
although it's hard to say. It's like March 93 is sort of when Ken's Labyrinth, like the full version, had been finished, but I'd also started prototyping the next engine around the same time.
How did you link up with the guys at Apogee?
So my first contact with them was actually to send an early copy of Ken's Labyrinth, October 92. So this was before anybody knew who I was. And I think I must have sent them a floppy disk in an envelope. That's what you did back then. And I think Scott said he was impressed with the engine, but he would want to spend a lot of time working on the artwork. And so this was Ken's Labyrinth, not Build. From what I gathered, he wanted to spend a lot of time probably rewriting the game from scratch and maybe just use the engine. I don't think he cared for my artwork very much. It looked very amateurish at the time. But I agree with him on that. As a kid, I might not have.
So you ended up signing the contract with Apogee 3D Realms to
Mm-hmm.
do the build engine.
Yep.
And how you were still 17 when you signed the contract?
Yes, this was August 93. So, yep,
That's
I was
awesome.
17. I had to have my dad, I think, signed it because he was the legal guardian at the time.
Were there any special clauses in there since you were still a kid?
There were. It was supposed to not interfere with my college studies,
That's
but
awesome.
it totally did. I ended up passing only half of my courses, probably because I spent too much time programming at the time.
So who helped you negotiate the contract? Was there a lot of back and forth, or were you like, sold?
I don't remember there being back and forth. Their initial contract seemed like it was fine. I think my mom might have added the one phrase about it not interfering with college. Apogee made very short contracts back then. It all fit on one page, and I liked that about them.
What was that experience like? I mean, did you have any idea what you were getting into?
Um, no, I mean, I was happy they released the build editor. It was a very neat tool, so I'm glad everyone got to see that. I guess in the very early days, I think I was using the internet in 97 when I was at college. That's when I first had like a constant connection, which is a big difference when you're having to call in the modem every night. So when you're constantly connected, you could easily search for total conversions, and I would download them and I would look for the people who made the most intricate maps because that's what interested me most, to see like the really cool tricks that like they could make a map that looked like Quake in the build editor, and that was really cool.
So what was the experience like working with 3D Realms? What did you have to relocate?
I visited them 10 times, usually for about a month at a time, and I enjoyed working in their offices because you could see map designers doing their thing. Sometimes, if I was bored or frustrated, I would just sit behind them and watch for a bit. Artists, you could see them, some of them would draw one pixel at a time, like basically manually dithering, which is cool. Uh, and to work with the programmers was really neat because I would learn a lot myself. Some of them had been programming a lot longer than I had, and because my style was very self-taught, and so I would do a lot of things that weren't really the best way to do things. I didn't prototype my functions very well. For example, I neglected return values. I just leave it empty because the Wacom compiler didn't complain when you did that. I didn't know any better. I used a lot of global variables with ridiculous names, some probably shorter than they should have been. I should have put them on structures when I didn't. But maybe part of the reason I did that is because it actually would run faster. I would Anytime you use a structure, if it's not exactly a power of 2, then the compiler has to do multiplies inside the box, and I didn't like that. But usually they could optimize and increment by the structure size if you're going through a list of structures. So I hadn't fully thought that all through and tested it thoroughly. Structures and things like that were new to me back then. I only started C programming in 91,
Hmm,
and by 93 I was already making the build engine.
that's wild.
So it takes a few years to learn style, especially when you're not learning C in school.
So without getting too much into the technical weeds, what led you to design build the way that you did?
I mean, it started out as whatever I thought it should be. I didn't know what an engine was. Scott Miller had told me an engine is so and so. But some of it was due to requests from the various teams. Duke Nukem, Shadow Warrior, Blood were the three teams that I worked with the most. Um, Usually, the Blood team was the most advanced, and they knew the most programming out of the three. Maybe they were more experienced and older. The Shadow Warrior team also made some very good code. And Todd was sort of like myself in that I think he was self-taught mostly. And he would,
This is Todd Rupogel.
Todd Replogle, so he would spend all his time programming day and night. This is, before he had a family of his own. And so he had nothing else to do. He was living in Texas. It just seemed like he worked all night when he came in the morning, which was more than I did. But yeah, he worked hard.
And how many years did you work there for 3D
Uh,
Realm?
3 or 4, depending on how you count it. Three as a full employee, 4 if you count the extra year where I was consultant.
And did you speak with Carmack or any of those guys during
Not
those years?
not very often. I actually talked to Carmack twice by phone, and I think both times Scott or George had pleaded with me to call him because I don't like talking to people on the phone, especially, and even video. I don't do that very much, as you know. And I visited id Software twice. The first time was actually with my parents, which was pretty cool. So they got to meet the people at id Software. Second time was, I think, mid-95. And if I recall, at the time, we were trying to hide the fact that the build engine had slopes, because I think I had just started to add those. And we knew that Quake had them, and we didn't want to give away everything. So maybe that was a surprise to them when Duke was released.
So Duke is released, and at what point did you realize, wow, this might be something special? This is a game changer.
So when Duke was released, I think I was in Washington State at the time visiting the Blood team. And I think they were all surprised that 3D Realms had released it at that point because we probably all thought it had another month or two. And then later on, I find out that it was probably because the beta was released. They wanted to put something out there before it got too far. I spent a lot of time in Rhode Island where I wasn't really hanging around with people who were playing the game. My parents didn't know any better. They weren't playing games. I guess most of my news I got from George and Scott about the game was selling, which is great. And then I returned to school in '97. So that was about a year after the game was released. And I just didn't see too much. I mean, sometimes I saw maybe somebody talking about it, and that was really unusual. I mean, one day I was wearing a Duke Nukem shirt, and some guy was like, "Did you work on that?" And I'm like, "Yeah."
That's awesome. Well, I got one
But
myself
I
that I
know.
still proudly wear. It's one of my favorites. It's funny walking around. I'm surprised at how many people give compliments on it, and it's really cool to see 30 years later, guys in their 40s and 50s like us that are like, "Hey, I love this shirt, Duke Nukem, yeah!" And it's amazing. Everywhere you go, people recognize it. It's had quite an impact on a number of people, that game, but certainly none more so than yourself. How did that experience impact you in the remainder of your life?
Well, let's see. After the build engine, for many years, I tried to write a follow up, and one was a voxel engine called VoxLab. I tried Polygon engines, um, another follow up to the build engine, but none of them really took off. The VoxLab engine, I saw 2 pretty good projects based off of it. It was Voxelstein, which had a very pretty environment and some actually really cool gameplay to it as well. What was the other one? Ace of Spades was a really neat multiplayer game. Very cool concept, but that kind of died out, and that's about it. So, after 10 years of that, um, I got a little frustrated. What am I doing here? And around 2013 is when Voxon found me using my website. They found that I had worked on voxels, and they were working on a product called the VoxyBox at the time. That's what it was called. And basically, it's a 3D display that had projectors inside it, and it could change the image very quickly. And basically, what you have is something like a Princess Leia hologram using persistence of vision. And things are actually going quite well at Voxon right now because we have this new display based on LED technology, and it's finally large and bright, which is something we've been trying to do for many years. I'm actually wearing the Voxon sweatshirt here.
Tell me a little bit more about Voxon.
Voxon is just starting to sell its new VX2 and VX2 XL, and these are volumetric displays that are in a cylinder, spinning LED modules. I could show you a module over there, but it would take me a while to get that out. But yeah, basically it's the size of a human head for the smaller one, and for the bigger one, even bigger. It's like 4 times the volume. Really big things, and every person who walks up to it are like, "Wow, I've never seen anything like that," and that's cool to me because that's a lot like it was in the 90s when people saw 3D engines for the first time. So I think I'm doing the right thing by doing this. And plus, I also get to play with hardware a little bit. I've learned a lot about circuit board design over the last 20 or so years. Um, I've been mentoring a course at Brown University called Embedded Systems, where the students design a circuit board for some little product that they make. And so I've learned a lot by doing that. And I do that with my dad, who's been a professor since 1980 at Brown. He's actually retired last year, but he still hangs around because it's fun for the same reason I do.
Mhm.
And yeah, so we've got a good small team, and I think we'll soon have a hot product.
As far as the gaming industry is concerned, so you left there after the 90s. Why would you say that was?
Well, I didn't really. I tried to make follow-up engines. I was trying to make an engine to attract interest, but it just never happened.
You didn't want to
And
go work for somebody else?
well, no, I didn't want to. Let's just work on game code. I wanted to do the engine part.
Hmm.
And the problem was there were other engines that were much better than mine that I had a tough time keeping up with. These were teams of people, such as Unreal. That's a team of people. How do I compete with that?
Hmm.
And so if I was to stay in the game industry, what was I going to do? Join an engine team? I could have done that. But, you know, I'd had enough.
It
It's
wasn't as fulfilling.
just too much for one person.
Hmm.
And, I've got my own style.
It's amazing to see the changes that have happened in the industry over the past 30 years. And I too dreamed of having a career in video game design, and now you see where how saturated it's become. The tools are readily available, and it's very difficult to make any kind of profit in the industry. And there's massive layoffs. I've forged a different path that's been very fulfilling, but now I'm getting back into it, and it's really exciting to see the interest in retro games, in things kind of going back. Our guys our age are remembering the excitement of the 90s. A lot of us have kids ourselves, or we're just feeling the nostalgia and pulling up these old games. And so you're seeing a real resurgence in that.
So I've been playing around with retro PCs as well. In fact, I've got one over here.
Awesome.
Yeah, that one's a Pentium, and the one over there is a 486. And you can see the CRT there.
I've got a Pentium 3 that's a Dell 4100, and I've got a Pentium 4 as a Windows XP rig that I have. So last question, who would you like to see me interview next?
How about John Carmack, Tim Sweeney, or if you want
They'd
to
be good
go
ones.
with people who I've worked with, Todd Replogle, he might be tough to find. Frank Madden would be good to get. Nick Newhart from the Blood Team, Peter Fries. These are all my programmer people.
Awesome. Yeah, I'd love to get Nick on. That'd be really cool. Blood is one of my favorite build engine games. We'll see who I can get. Thank you so much, Ken.